James Miller wiped the sweat from his forehead as he made his final inspection round through Station Delta 7's maintenance tunnels. The day shift was ending, and the artificial lighting had dimmed to simulate evening. After 12 years working as a construction foreman on various space stations, he knew every creak, hum, and whisper of machinery. That's why the unusual sound caught his attention immediately. A soft whimper echoed through the metal corridor, followed by what sounded like hushed whispers. James frowned. These tunnels were strictly off-limits to anyone without proper clearance. He pulled out his work tablet, checking the maintenance schedule. No one else should be down here. "Hello," he called out, his voice bouncing off the curved walls. "This is a restricted area." The whimpering stopped abruptly. James walked forward, his heavy boots clanking against the metal floor. As he turned the corner, he saw movement in the shadows near a large ventilation unit. His hand moved to the emergency communicator on his belt, ready to call security. "Please," a soft voice called out. "Please don't report us." James stepped closer, and his eyes widened. Huddled in the corner was a creature he recognized as a Muriel, one of the avian-like species that occasionally traded with the station. Her feathers were a dull blue-gray, some of them bent and broken. But what caught his attention was the small bundle she held protectively against her chest. "You're not supposed to be here," James said, but his voice softened when he saw the fear in her large, dark eyes. "This section is dangerous. There's high-voltage equipment everywhere." The Muriel female shifted slightly, and James saw that the bundle was a child, no more than 4 or 5 years old by human standards. The little one's feathers had barely grown in, showing patches of soft down underneath. "I know," she said, her translator making her voice sound slightly mechanical. "But we had nowhere else to go. The security teams are searching all the public areas." James ran a hand through his graying hair. He knew about the recent crackdown on illegal aliens on the station. Trade relations with several species had become tense lately, and station management was under pressure to show they were enforcing regulations. "My name is Lyra," the Muriel continued quickly, probably sensing his internal conflict. "This is my child, Val. Please, we just need time to." She was interrupted by the station's warning system. "Attention all personnel. Security sweep in progress in sectors 7 through 12. Please have identification ready." The child stirred, letting out a frightened chirp. Lyra pulled Val closer, her feathers puffing up in distress. "They'll take Val away," she whispered. "In our society, a widow without proper status. They'll put my child in a state facility. Please." James looked at his tablet again. The security sweep would reach their section in less than 10 minutes. He thought about the regulations, his job responsibilities, the potential consequences. Then he looked at the terrified mother and child huddled on the cold metal floor. "Follow me," he said finally, making a decision that would change his life forever. "I know a safe place, but he'll have to explain everything." Lyra stood shakily, her long legs unsteady after hours of crouching. Val clung to her, small eyes peering curiously at James from beneath downy feathers. "Thank you," Lyra said, her translator barely catching the tremor in her voice. "I will explain everything. I promise." As James led them through the back corridors toward his private quarters, he couldn't help but wonder what he was getting himself into. But something in him knew he couldn't have made any other choice. Sometimes, he thought, being human meant following your heart instead of the rules. The security announcement echoed again through the tunnels behind them, but James had already made his decision. Whatever trouble this brought, he would face it. For now, he had 2 frightened refugees to protect, and that was all that mattered. James's private quarters weren't large, but they felt like a palace compared to the maintenance tunnels. He watched as Lyra gently placed Val on his couch, the child's feathers finally relaxing from their frightened puff. The room's warm lighting revealed what he hadn't seen clearly in the tunnels. Both mother and child looked thin and exhausted. "When was the last time you ate?" James asked, walking to his small kitchen unit. 2 days, Lyra replied, her translator catching the shame in her voice. "We had some emergency rations, but they ran out." James pulled out some nutrient packs he kept for emergency shifts. He'd seen Muriel traders eat these before, so he knew they were safe. "Here," he said, handing them over. "Start with these. I'll get some proper food sent up later." As Lyra helped Val eat, she began explaining their situation. Her husband had been a skilled technician on their homeworld, working on advanced energy systems. "The accident happened 3 months ago," she said, her feathers drooping. "A containment failure. He didn't suffer." James sat quietly, letting her talk. He'd seen his share of industrial accidents over the years, and they never got easier to hear about. "In our society," Lyra continued, "we have strict rules about family units. Children belong to their father's caste. The technical caste, in Val's case, when a father dies, his widow must either remarry within the same caste within 6 months or surrender the child to state care." She stroked Val's head feathers gently. "They say it's to ensure proper education and maintain social order." "And you couldn't find someone to marry?" James asked. Lyra's laugh was bitter. "The technical caste is small, and most are already paired. Those who weren't," she paused, "they wanted nothing to do with another man's child. The deadline is in 2 weeks. When I heard they were coming to take Val, we ran." James processed this information slowly. He'd dealt with various alien cultures during his years on space stations, but the rigid nature of Muriel society surprised him. "What about your family? Friends?" "Going against the caste system means being outcasted," Lyra explained. "No one would risk helping us." She looked at James directly. "But then I heard something interesting about humans." James raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Your species doesn't have a formal status in our society's hierarchy. You're too new to the galactic community. Some say this means you have no status, but others argue it means you could potentially fit into any caste." Lyra's feathers trembled slightly. "That's why I came to this station. I thought maybe." The realization hit James like a load of construction materials. "You're looking for a human husband." Val had fallen asleep on the couch, the food and warmth finally providing enough comfort for rest. Lyra stood up, her full height making her bow slightly under the standard issue ceiling. "I know it's asking too much. I know it sounds crazy. But I've seen how humans treat children, even those not their own. Your species has a reputation for being protective, caring. And what happens to Val if you don't find someone?" James asked, though he already knew the answer. "State care facilities are." Lyra's voice cracked, her translator struggling to convey the emotion. "They say the children are well treated, but they're really just workforce training centers. All individual choices are removed. All family bonds are severed." Val would never. She couldn't finish. James stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the stars. He thought about his own life. 12 years of building things on various stations, living alone, sending credits back to Earth. He'd never planned on having a family. The job didn't really allow for it. But now, it would be complicated, he said finally, still looking at the stars. There would be legal issues, cultural problems, probably some career complications for me. "I understand," Lyra said quietly, her feathers drooping further. "We'll leave." "I'm sorry to have." "I wasn't finished," James interrupted, turning back to face her. "I was going to say it would be complicated, but I'm willing to try if you are." The hope that bloomed in Lyra's eyes made the stars outside seem dim in comparison. The station's administrative office felt colder than usual as James and Lyra sat before Mrs. Thompson, the chief civil administrator. The older woman peered at them over her glasses, her expression a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Mrs. Thompson said, tapping her screen. "You, James Miller, a human station foreman with 12 years of service, want to marry a Muriel widow you met." She checked her notes. "Yesterday." "That's correct," James replied, keeping his voice steady. Next to him, Lyra sat perfectly still, only the slight rustle of her feathers betraying her nervousness. Val was asleep in a waiting area outside, watched by a sympathetic secretary. "You realize this is highly unusual," Mrs. Thompson continued. "We've had mixed-species marriages on the station before, but never with such urgency." Her eyes narrowed. "And never involving custody of a child." James leaned forward. "I understand your concerns, but there's nothing in station regulations that prohibits this marriage. I've checked." "No, there isn't," Mrs. Thompson admitted. "But there are responsibilities you might not understand. Mr. Miller, Muriel marriage isn't just a legal contract. It involves cultural obligations, especially regarding children." Lyra spoke up, her translator conveying her formal tone. "I have explained our customs to James. He understands that taking responsibility for Val means more than just providing food and shelter. He must help maintain Val's connection to our culture, our traditions." Mrs. Thompson raised an eyebrow. "And you're prepared for this, Mr. Miller? Teaching a child about a culture you barely know?" "I'm willing to learn," James replied. "And Lyra will help me. We've already discussed how we'll handle Val's education." He hadn't slept much last night, spending hours talking with Lyra about Muriel customs and traditions. The administrator sighed and pulled up another screen. "The Muriel Embassy has sent their response to our inquiry. They say that while unusual, there is precedent for humans being granted provisional case status through marriage. However," she paused, "they will be sending an observer to ensure proper cultural protocols are followed." Lyra's feathers flattened in surprise. "An observer? From which caste?" "Educational caste," Mrs. Thompson replied. "They'll arrive within the week." James felt his stomach tighten. He hadn't expected such close scrutiny, but he kept his voice calm. "That's fine. We have nothing to hide." Mrs. Thompson looked at them both for a long moment, then began preparing the documents. "Very well. But Mr. Miller, you should know that your workers' quarters aren't suitable for a family. You'll need to apply for family housing." "Already done," James said. He'd spent his morning break submitting the request. Section 4, Level 3. It's closer to the school area. As they signed the various documents, both Earth Standard and Muriel formats, James noticed how his hand stayed steady while Lyra's feathered fingers trembled slightly. This was really happening. After leaving the office, they found Val still sleeping peacefully. The child had barely stirred during the whole process, exhausted from days of hiding and running. "There will be talk," Lyra said quietly as they walked toward James's quarters to pack. "Your human colleagues, they might not understand." James nodded. He'd already gotten strange looks from his maintenance team when he'd called in to take a personal day. "Let them talk. We're not breaking any rules." They reached his quarters, and James started gathering his belongings. As he packed, he noticed Lyra standing by the window, her feathers catching the starlight. "Are you sure about this?" she asked suddenly. "You've changed your whole life in just one day. For strangers." James stopped packing and walked over to her. "You're not strangers anymore," he said simply. "You're family now. That's how humans see it. Once we make that choice, it's final." Lyra's translator couldn't quite capture the soft trill she made, but James understood the meaning anyway. Sometimes, words weren't needed to express gratitude. The station's day cycle was shifting to evening when they finally headed to their new quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: moving, settling in, preparing for the observer's arrival. But for now, they were simply a family, walking home together beneath the artificial stars. 1 week into their new life together, James stood nervously at the station's diplomatic dock. Beside him, Lyra adjusted Val's ceremonial robe, a small garment covered in intricate patterns that she had spent 3 nights making. The dock's airlock cycled, and James straightened his own formal uniform. The Muriel observer who stepped through the airlock was taller than Lyra, with deep purple feathers that seemed to shimmer under the station lights. The official's translator activated with a soft hum. I am observer Key of the educational cast, the Muriel announced, fixing James with an unblinking stare. I am here to evaluate the cultural integrity of this unusual arrangement. Val clutched Lyra's leg, peering at the new arrival with a mixture of curiosity and fear. James noticed how the observer's eyes lingered on the child's rumpled robe. "Welcome to Station Delta 7, James said, remembering the formal greeting Lyra had taught him. We offer you shelter and sustenance during your stay. Observer Key's feathers twitched slightly. Surprise, James had learned to recognize. Perhaps the official hadn't expected a human to know their customs. Back in their new family quarters, Observer Key began the evaluation immediately. The official moved through their living space, noting every detail. James had spent days preparing, following Lyra's guidance to arrange things properly. The traditional meditation corner, the learning space for Val, even the way their meals were stored. Everything had meaning in Muriel culture. "Show me Val's daily routine," Observer Key commanded. Lyra guided Val through their morning ritual, the greeting to the ancestors, the proper way to groom feathers, the educational songs that taught both language and history. James joined in where he could, his human voice awkwardly but earnestly trying to match the Muriel tones. "And you, human," Observer Key turned to James. "What do you teach the child?" James took a deep breath. "Val, show Observer Key what we learned yesterday." Val brightened and ran to the learning corner. The child pulled out a diagram they had made together, a simple electronic circuit. "James taught me how electricity moves," Val chirped excitedly. "Like father used to work with." Observer Key's feathers ruffled. "Technical education is reserved for the technical caste," James finished firmly, "which Val belongs to. I may be human, but I understand my responsibility to nurture Val's inherited caste abilities." The observer studied James for a long moment. "And what of our spiritual teachings? Our traditions? Perhaps you'd like to join us for evening meal?" Lyra interjected smoothly. "We follow all the proper ceremonies." During the meal, James demonstrated what he had learned. He spoke the traditional blessing, albeit with human pronunciation. He served food in the correct order, remembering which dishes held special meaning. Val helped, showing how James had been teaching proper table manners, a blend of human politeness and Muriel tradition. "Interesting," Observer Key noted, watching Val successfully use both Muriel eating tools and human utensils. "The child seems adaptable." "Val is learning both cultures," Lyra explained. "We believe this makes them stronger, not weaker." Later that evening, after Val had gone to sleep, Observer Key made an unexpected request. "Show me your work area, human." James led the official to the station's construction sector. As they walked, he explained his role, his responsibilities. To his surprise, the observer seemed genuinely interested. "Your species builds remarkable structures," Key admitted, looking at the station's massive support beams. Perhaps there is something to this mixing of knowledge." Back home, after the observer had left for their temporary quarters, Lyra found James studying Muriel historical texts on his tablet. "You didn't have to do all this," she said softly. James looked up from a particularly complex passage about Muriel engineering principles. "Yes, I did. This isn't just about passing an inspection. It's about giving Val the best of both worlds." Lyra's feathers softened, her way of showing affection. "Observer Key will report back soon. Do you think?" "We'll manage," James said firmly. "One day at a time. After all, isn't that the human way?" Lyra made a sound that James had come to recognize as laughter. "And the Muriel way too, it seems." The emergency alert woke James at 3 in the morning, station time. Val's monitoring bracelet was flashing red. Something was wrong. He rushed to the child's room, finding Lyra already there, her feathers puffed with worry. Val lay in bed, feathers slick with fever sweat, breathing too fast. Small whimpers escaped with each breath, and the child's usually bright eyes were dull and unfocused. "Temperature's too high," James said, checking the medical scanner. "We need to get to the medical bay." The station's medical bay was designed to handle various species, but Dr. Roberts had never seen anything quite like this. She looked from her screens to Val, then back again, frowning. "It's unusual," she said, running another scan. "The symptoms don't match typical Muriel childhood illnesses. And there's something else." She pointed to a complex display of numbers and charts. Observer Key, who had arrived moments after hearing about the emergency, stepped forward to examine the readings. "These patterns, they suggest an adaptation to human environmental factors. Val's immune system is trying to adjust to the station's environment," Dr. Roberts explained. "But it's causing a conflict with normal Muriel biological processes. It's like the body can't decide which way to go." Lyra's feathers trembled. "What can we do?" "Standard treatments might make it worse," Dr. Roberts admitted. "Muriel medicine could harm the human adaptations, and human medicine might damage the Muriel immune responses." James watched Val shiver on the medical bed, looking so small and fragile. The child had been fine just yesterday, playing with both human and Muriel learning toys, proud of mastering both styles. Suddenly, James had an idea. "What if we don't choose?" he said. "What if we combine both?" Dr. Roberts looked skeptical. "That's risky. We've never tried." "But it makes sense," Lyra interrupted, catching James's thought. "Val is living in both worlds already. The body is trying to adapt to both environments." She turned to Observer Key. "You've seen how Val thrives with both cultures. Maybe healing needs the same approach." Observer Key was quiet for a long moment, purple feathers shifting in thought. Finally, the official spoke. "There are ancient Muriel healing traditions passed down through generations, combined with human medical science." The next hours were intense. Dr. Roberts worked with her medical computers, while Lyra and Observer Key prepared traditional Muriel remedies. James moved between them, helping where he could, never leaving Val's side for long. They created something new, a treatment that used human temperature regulation technology alongside Muriel healing herbs, modern medications timed to match traditional Muriel healing cycles. James learned to sing Muriel healing songs while helping Dr. Roberts adjust the medical equipment. Val's fever finally broke near station dawn. The child's breathing eased, and color returned to the feathers. When Val opened their eyes, both human and Muriel medicines had done their work. "How do you feel, little one?" James asked softly. Val managed a weak smile. "Hungry," the child said, making everyone laugh with relief. Later, as Val rested comfortably, Observer Key approached James and Lyra. "I came to evaluate if a human could properly raise a Muriel child," the official said formally. "I was concerned about maintaining our traditions, our ways." The observer's feathers shifted to a more relaxed position. "But perhaps I was asking the wrong question. Perhaps I should have asked what new strengths could come from this union." James looked through the medical bay window at Val, now sleeping peacefully. "Sometimes the best traditions are the new ones we make together," he said. Lyra reached out, her feathered hand finding James's human one. "Like our family," she added softly. Observer Key made a note on an official tablet. "I will report that this arrangement is not just acceptable, but beneficial. Your family has shown that different worlds can join to create something stronger." As station morning fully arrived, Val was already asking to get up and play. The crisis had passed, but it had changed them all. They weren't just three individuals trying to make an unusual situation work anymore. They were truly a family, stronger because of their differences, not in spite of them. James looked at his small family, his Muriel wife smoothing Val's feathers, Observer Key making approving notes, Dr. Roberts smiling at her screens, and knew that sometimes the best families are the ones you build together, one challenge at a time. 3 days after Val's recovery, James stood nervously before the Muriel High Council's holographic projection in the station's main conference room. The 7 council members, their feathers ranging from deep purple to silver, studied him with intense interest. Lyra stood beside him, with Val between them, while Observer Key waited nearby. "We have reviewed Observer Key's reports," the head council member said, their translator giving the words a formal tone. "The situation is unprecedented." James felt Lyra's feathers brush against his arm, her way of sharing strength. Val looked up at both parents, still a bit pale from the illness, but standing proud in newly made formal robes that combined both human and Muriel styles. "Your handling of the medical crisis has particularly caught our attention," another council member noted. "The combination of human medical science and Muriel traditional healing is remarkable. Dr. Roberts has already submitted a paper for review." Observer Key stepped forward. "If I may speak, honored council." At their nod, the observer continued. "When I first arrived, I expected to find our traditions being ignored or mishandled. Instead, I discovered something extraordinary. This family has not weakened our ways. They have added to them." Val chose that moment to demonstrate, stepping forward and performing a perfect Muriel greeting bow, followed by a crisp human salute that James had taught them. Several council members' feathers rustled in surprise. "Tell us, child," one council member asked gently, "how do you feel about your unusual family?" Val looked up confidently. "James teaches me about building things, like my first father did. He learns our songs and stories too. Mother says I have the best of both worlds. Observer Key says I'm making new traditions." The head council member's feathers shifted to a more relaxed position. Observer Key's final report suggests that this arrangement has produced unexpected benefits. The child shows advanced problem-solving abilities, combining both human practical approaches and Muriel theoretical understanding. Furthermore, another council member added, "The medical breakthrough during the crisis has opened new possibilities for both our peoples." Several other mixed-species families on the station have already requested similar arrangements. James felt his heart lift. He hadn't known about others following their example. The head council member raised their feathers in the formal position of pronouncement. "We have reached a decision. This family unit is officially recognized by the Muriel High Council. Moreover, we are establishing a new classification for similar cases. James Miller, you are granted the status of cultural bridge bearer, a position that allows you to maintain both human identity and Muriel caste responsibilities." Lyra's feathers puffed with joy, and Val bounced excitedly. James bowed in the Muriel way, struggling to maintain formal composure. "Additionally," the council continued, "we request that you document your experiences. Other families may follow your path, and your insights would be valuable." After the council's projection faded, Observer Key approached them. "I will be remaining on the station for some time. The council wishes me to study other potential mixed-species families. Would you be willing to help them as advisors?" "Of course," James said, still processing everything. "They deserve the same chance we got." Later that evening, in their quarters, they celebrated in both human and Muriel ways. Val proudly showed off new drawings that mixed circuit diagrams with traditional Muriel patterns. Lyra prepared a meal that combined foods from both cultures. "I never expected this," Lyra said softly as they watched Val explain the drawings to a fascinated Observer Key. "When I first hid in those maintenance tunnels, I only hoped to save my child. Instead, we've started something much bigger." James smiled, watching Val demonstrate how the circuits matched ancient Muriel energy flow patterns. "Sometimes the best families are the ones that break the mold," he said. "And sometimes breaking the mold helps others find their way too." Through their window, they could see other families walking along the station's promenade. Humans, Muriels, and other species, some looking curiously at the notices about mixed-species family applications. Their small family had opened a door, and others were finding the courage to walk through it. Val came running over with another drawing. "Look, I designed a new way to teach both human and Muriel children together." James and Lyra exchanged glances. Their family story was just beginning, and it was already changing the world around them. one small step at a time. 1 year had passed since the High Council's decision. Station Delta 7 had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. James stood in the newly opened Mixed Species Family Center, watching Val give a presentation to a group of curious children. Human, Muriel, and several other species. And this is how both human and Muriel circuits work together, Val explained, pointing to a diagram that beautifully merged both engineering styles. The child's confidence had grown tremendously over the past year. Val's feathers, now fully grown, shimmered with health as small hands moved between holographic displays. Lyra stood beside James, her feathers brushing against his arm in their private gesture of affection. "Remember when we were hiding in maintenance tunnels?" she whispered. "Look at us now." The center had been James's idea, supported enthusiastically by both station management and the Muriel Council. It was a place where mixed species families could meet, learn from each other, and get help navigating the challenges they faced. Today was its official opening ceremony. Observer Key, who had become a permanent station resident and close family friend, approached them with a datapad. 3 more applications for mixed species marriages this week, the Observer reported. 2 human Muriel and 1 human with a Centaurian family. They all mentioned your family's story as their inspiration. James watched as Val finished the presentation, answering questions from both human and alien children with easy grace. The child switched effortlessly between human standard and Muriel communication styles, making everyone feel included. "James," Lyra said softly, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you." Her feathers quivered with what he now recognized as nervous excitement. "The medical technologies we developed during Val's illness, they've made something possible, something we didn't think could happen." James turned to her, curious. Lyra's feathers puffed slightly as she continued. "The doctors say we might be able to have a child together. A true human Muriel child. They've found a way." The news took his breath away. A year ago, the idea would have seemed impossible. But now, after everything they'd achieved. Their conversation was interrupted as Val came running over, followed by a small group of children. "Mom, Dad, can I show them the family photo wall? Please." The photo wall had been Val's project, a collection of images showing their family's journey. It started with a security camera still from the maintenance tunnels where James had first found them, continued through their marriage ceremony, Val's illness and recovery, and the council's recognition. The final image was from last week, the 3 of them helping another mixed family move into their new quarters. "Of course you can, Val," James said, smiling at the excited children. "That's why we built this place." As Val led the group away, Dr. Roberts joined them. She had become the station's expert on mixed species medicine after Val's case. "The new families are adapting well," she reported. "Using your experience as a guide has made everything much smoother. The combined medical treatments we developed are becoming standard practice." The station's commander made an appearance, nodding approvingly at the center's success. Family housing had been expanded to accommodate the growing number of mixed species families, and the station had become known as a haven for those seeking to build bridges between cultures. Later that evening, in their quarters, James looked at his family with pride. Val was teaching Lyra a human card game while simultaneously explaining Muriel energy principles to her. It was such a natural blend of both worlds that it seemed strange to remember there was ever a time when such things seemed impossible. "You know," James said, dealing cards to join their game, "when you first asked me to marry you to save Val, I thought I was just helping one family." Lyra's feathers softened with affection. "Instead, you helped create many families." Val looked up from the cards with a bright smile. "And now we're going to keep helping more, right?" "Yes," James answered, looking at Lyra's hopeful expression and thinking about her news from earlier. "We're going to keep building bridges, one family at a time." Through their window, the stars shone brightly, seeming to twinkle with promise for the future. Their desperate gamble in the maintenance tunnels had grown into something beautiful, not just a family, but a movement, a new way of seeing what was possible when love crossed the boundaries of species and space. Val won the card game that night, celebrating with both a human victory dance and a Muriel joy trill. James and Lyra watched, their hearts full, knowing that their story was still just beginning. After all, the best families never stop growing, learning, and loving, no matter what species they might be.